Welcome to Tail Learn Code. Here there will be tales about software development, learning from each other, code to build solutions. And now your host, Chad Green.
You're too kind. Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So I am Sam Basu. I am out of Erie, Pennsylvania, right up by the lake. There's a little town called Erie, by Lake Erie. So I live here with my family, and I've been remote for like 10 years now, but these times are different. I am a developer advocate for Progress Software, which many of you probably hear or heard about us for the things we make. That is Telerik and Kenda UI and all the different productivity tools for developers to be successful. I travel a lot, so I'm actually on my on a plane today to get to Antarctica because that's apparently the only place we can have in-person conferences. Because I miss everybody's faces. Chad, I put out a tweet this morning to say I miss everybody so much. Like I'm gonna hug everybody. But these help. Like these conversations help, and I cannot thank you enough for pulling in all the speakers into these conversations. This is awesome. Yeah, so as like you and me and others have said, like even for folks who have been remote for years and years, this is very different. Quarantined remote working is very different from normal remote working. I have a 4-year-old, and the wife is a college professor, so we are always like juggling our schedules, trying to make sure we have time for our meetings as well as we're taking care of the kid. And I mean, others I'm sure have like other family members to take care of. So it's hard. It's hard for everybody. There's no lying about it. But what do? You make the most of it. You try to stay productive. You do the things that make you happy, and you move forward. It's actually not terrible. We are thankfully not in a hotspot, and the numbers have risen a little bit. So we had like different phases of opening, and our county was one of the last, along with like Philly. We're on the other side of the state compared to Philly, but we were very late going into green. So since we went into green, businesses have opened up, which is good, and a lot of folks have been hurting. But we have seen a little bit of a spike, but it's not too bad. It's not bad enough to like overwhelm the healthcare system, which is what everybody is concerned about. So we are doing okay compared to other states like Texas or Florida right now. Yeah, it's unfortunate. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And it is really sad, like you said, like these have become like political issues. Like the other thing that's growing is like schools opening in fall. And these things are tricky. And the good news is we have lived through like half the year. The remainder half is going to be interesting. And like health is important for everybody, like especially with kids and elder people. So yeah, I mean, it doesn't take much to put on a mask. You can make it a fashion statement, in fact. But that helps keeping businesses open and schools and everything else reopening if we could control this a little bit. But again, at the end of the day, the vaccine is what we're all kind of waiting and hoping for. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that we actually cannot, like, we actually live fairly close to the Canadian border. So we can't go into Canada, we can't go into Mexico, and Europe is off the limits. So we are on our own until we fix this. Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's a little bit depressing, but hopefully we are all in this together, and yeah, we are trying to do the best we can to get come out of this. Well, up until March, it was in person, and then everything got cut off because like we hit spring break mid-March, and then everything was off. So the spring semester, pretty much, it was online mostly. Summer, unless you have research work, they don't have a lot of classes that they teach on campus. And then fall is getting interesting because, and everybody is in the same boat. We don't know exactly how it's going to be like, but a lot of schools have similar plans. Like they're going to start a little early, and then they're going to go in a staggered way. So like not everyone in the same class shows up at the same time. Maybe some days of the week you have online classes, and then I think the goal with lots of schools is to kind of end the semester by around Thanksgiving, so folks don't get to go back home and then come back to the campus up until like next January. So we shall see. Yeah, right, right. Yeah, it's hard. Like most like academic institutions, like without enrollment, it is hard. Like I mean, this is true for any economy here. Like everybody just wants to get back, but we just have to be careful. So that's the tricky part. And for us, like we have a 4-year-old, and social distancing it does not work really because once you send them to school, like all gates are open. So we just have to come to a decision. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We are enjoying all the times that we do spend, but it gets to be a little challenging sometimes where we are balancing meetings and work schedules. So, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I mean, with little kids, like you're helping them build memories, really. So anytime we can spend with them, and then that helps. Okay, that's a loaded question. So, like, several years back, we had to really struggle to explain this, but I think for the most part, most technical companies who make products for technical audiences now realize the necessity of this role because you cannot speak to a technical audience from a marketing standpoint because we tend to block things out as developers do with we are very cynical in the way we gather knowledge and we assimilate things. So we are cynical, and anything marketing, we tend to zone it out. So we have to talk in the language that our audience understands. The challenges are like every developer learns in our own way, right? Oh, hey, it's our good friend Kevin Griffin in the chat room.
Lovely. I've been talking this whole time and no one can hear me. My mic has been muted on the stream.
Oh, boy.
I didn't even notice that.
Oh, boy.
Oh, well.
Oh, boy. Yeah. So, yeah, Kevin Griffin is our good friend.
Yes.
He knows me and Chad very well. Yeah. So it's an interesting thing because every developer learns in their own way. Like as I age, like I have noticed that I am much more open to reading things and doing things rather than watching videos. But again, some are open to reading books, some are open to watching videos, some are open to watching things on stream, seeing another person do it. So we have to kind of cater to every different way of reaching out to folks, and we always have to lead with a story. Like here is technology trying to solve a problem, and at the trail end of it, here is maybe your product that helps in the endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then, what products you? And again, I'm giving softballs at this point, but I mean, what products do you support within Progress?
Right. So I come from a long .NET background. I know just enough JavaScript to be dangerous. But I mostly support all of the .NET tools we make. So we make a whole portfolio of things, but it's mostly Telerik for all the .NET. We make UI controls and frameworks for web, desktop, mobile. We make reporting solutions, CMSs, networking tools. So I mostly cover the .NET side of the family and some productivity. And then we have folks who do JavaScript and other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And then, I mean, with that, I mean, where's your passion?
So I have done a lot of web stuff back in my days. I do a lot of mobile nowadays, but I've also realized like a lot of enterprises really run on desktop. So I spent spend my time mostly on mobile and desktop nowadays, actually, and I get into web when we need to, because the web is ubiquitous. We have to use the cloud for things like continuity of solutions across different platforms. But I mostly stay with .NET, and I try to go cross-platform, because I mean we are in 2020, so you want to be writing things as cross-platform as you can. The things are, I mean, it's a little tricky at times, because solutions and tools are a little tricky when you have to reach as many number of platforms as you can.
Oh yeah, definitely. So what's cool? Let's quickly go into your talks you're going to be doing, because actually that will spark some other questions. But okay, yeah. Look in the chat. There is something weird for some reason. I do not always show up on the online list. I've got to figure out what's going on with my Twitch account.
Thank you for following. Welcome to Tail Learn Code.
And I realized Kevin Griffin's now following. Well, now you'll see me even more.
Well, that will help. Oh, that's fantastic.
It's so all right. So you're going to be doing two talks, all right? And you notice a theme here. They're both in the mobile area. So the first one, what can Visual Studio do for mobile developers, right? I mean, what is going to be the key takeaway out of that?
Well, I can't tell you until the night before of the talk, because I'm not ready.
You mean a speaker who doesn't have their talk ready?
No.
Yeah, you got 41 days to get it ready.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
what do you think? Where do you think you're going to go with this?
Yeah. So for mobile, the story is complicated, right? So in a way, for developers, it's good to have choice, and we have a lot of choice. But developers sometimes get a little crippled when we have too much choice, right? So my advice always is pick the stack that works for you, pick the stack that you have your expertise in. Maybe your team knows .NET, maybe your team is invested in JavaScript. Pick something that works for you based on all of the other stuff you're doing, because you're most likely not just writing one mobile app unless you're in a startup that's focused. You have desktop applications, you have web applications, so pick something that really works for you. And there are broad categories of technologies that you can do to write mobile apps today. You could do straight up native apps for different platforms, which is very different platforms. So that comes with its own set of challenges. If you want to go cross-platform, there are several solutions. You could do mobile web, which is sort of like the lowest hanging fruit. You make your website work nicely on a mobile form factor. But then if you're already doing that, it might as well make it a PWA, which is a progressive web app. So it is a really good citizen on mobile devices. And then you can use similar technologies like JavaScript to make native apps. And I mean, hybrid apps were around for some time, but I mean, you are truly talking about native apps that are also cross-platform. So you have a plethora of technologies across the board to choose as to how you write your mobile app. The good news is if you are already in the Microsoft ecosystem, if you're already used to Visual Studio, it'll do most of it, almost all of it. The IntelliSense, the help that you need to write your code, have your project have some structure, all of that is in place, because essentially what you're writing is either .NET or JavaScript or CSS and Visual Studio. And by Visual Studio, I mean like Visual Studio for Windows, Mac, and VS Code. They'll all do about the same thing. What is challenging for mobile is all of the other stuff, because it's not just like write and ship. You have to write your app, and then you have to deploy your app as you start building it. That's onto like simulators and emulators. Then you get to deploying it to real devices. And then you get to decide whether you want to go to the app stores or whether you want to just deploy to your enterprise. Do you use the cloud? How do you do testing? And once you release your app, how do you know if users are using it right? Do you have analytics? How do you do authentication? So it's a whole gamut of problems that every mobile developer has to juggle. And I think kind of choosing a solid IDE and kind of sticking to it helps. The good news is Visual Studio will do a very good job no matter what technology stack you pick.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious. I mean, because I guess I never thought about it this way. Do you use Visual Studio for like swing development or for?
No.
Okay.
You cannot. So that you're going into native land, and you have to use native tools for Android and iOS. But for most other cross-platform solutions, Visual Studio.
All right. No, I get you. No, I get you. I guess I misheard that, which so I was like, wow, if you could do that, that's even cooler, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I love Visual Studio, you know, and you know, people ask me, well, why don't you use Visual Code more often? I'm like, nah, give me Visual Studio. You know, and I hear people make a good argument. Well, sometimes Visual Studio is maybe too much, maybe a little, you know, to do simple tasks. I'm like, well, yeah, there are times where I just want to open up a text file. I'll do that, or like a JSON file. I'll do that in Visual Code. But for most everything else, I want my environment that I've been using for 20 years now, right? And I'm definitely used to it. And know where all the bodies are hidden in it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I think unconsciously, like Microsoft and all of us together, like the ecosystem, we have built ourselves a really good walled garden. Like once you're inside Visual Studio, once you have all of your bells and whistles, it's a really good life. Like you know exactly where things are, you have all the power. But I think to Microsoft's point, like it was probably a barrier to entry. Like if you just wanted to spin up a web server, write a few lines of code, why would you have to download all of this and SQL Server and all of this ceremony to kind of get started? Like a college kid would just bring out a Mac and just a few lines of code, they can spin up a Node.js server. So I think that's where Visual Studio Code really kind of hits home, because like I know folks who have never touched a Microsoft product and they're using VS Code to write all of their code now. So it's good that they have different types of plays for different types of developers.
Oh yeah, like I said, I mean, the difference is, I mean, I've literally been using VS in some form for like 20 years, however long it's been out. I mean, you know, I you know, when the first versions came out with VB6, is when, you know, when we had an actual IDE. I mean, there was something before that, but you know, the Visual Studio is what it was because that's when well, there was VB, and then there were, you know, you could do some odd things with ASP.NET or ASP because it wasn't .NET back yet.
Classic ASP.
Yeah. Well, now I get tripped out because now there's classic ASP.NET. Like, wait a second. So does that make classic ASP classicer? Right?
Yeah, we're giving out our age here.
Yes. Well, you can see my age, right? It's
Hey, my age is hidden by a hat, so you can't tell.
Yeah. Well, look, I've got blonde hair, so you don't really notice. Okay, so Kevin Griffin's saying ASP.NET Legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I say, it's I mean, pretty much now MVC is almost becoming legacy now. It's, you know,
right. But I remember ASP.NET Legacy back in the days. Like we had like spaghetti code where your markup and your server-side code was just like all tied up together.
Oh, yeah.
Impossible to test. But those were the good old days.
Oh yeah, and writing VB script, you know, it's because that was the way to do it.
Right.
And then they wonder why we don't like JavaScript, right?
Yeah, I mean, JavaScript probably started off on the wrong foot for like what it was intended to, but I mean, look where things are, like how much it's grown, and I mean, it's everywhere. Yeah, and then Blazor is probably coming along to let C# and .NET developers write things front and back, but if you still have to pick like a language that just gets you most number of platforms, it still probably is JavaScript.
Oh yeah, definitely agree with that. So, although I really do need to get more into Blazor. You know, unfortunately, I don't know anyone who knows anything about Blazor.
Not at least in your town.
Well, he's actually not in my town, right?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So,
I mean, the fun part, I mean, yes, he's in the Louisville area, but he's actually kind of far away.
We're talking about our good friend Ed Charbonneau, who's actually a colleague of mine, and he has invested his whole life into Blazor. Like if Microsoft wakes up tomorrow and says, we are done with Blazor, I think he's just going to continue and maintain it himself.
I think so. I gotta admit, he picked that one right. I mean, it's there were. I mean, I know people who were kind of questioning, you know, his vigor he went into it. But you know, I think he took the right gamble because it's. I mean, time will still tell because I mean it's still new. You know, Blazor's still new. Yeah. I mean, Ed's been doing it for like 2 years, but it's still pretty new. And Yeah.
I had a lot of vigor going into Silverlight, but yeah, that didn't quite end well for me.
Well, as did most people, right? But of course, as you well know, you get to blame Steve Jobs for that.
I remember that scathing letter he wrote, the open letter,
Yep.
and then Flash, for honest reasons, it had issues, and everyone just saw the writing on the wall that plugins just cannot scale to do the things that we are expecting to do. So yeah, so I think Silverlight, it's interesting. The end of life is actually next year, so we are actually planning a series of migration type content where, I mean, believe it or not, people still maintain those apps.
Sure.
And we, as a part of all of the Telerik suites, we have a Silverlight suite, and it's maintained by the same folks who do all of our other XAML stuff. And every release, we throw out a little bit of love, and we ask people to upgrade, and they don't. So eventually, that's going to hit end of life next year, and people will look to move on. So we shall see.
I didn't realize that Telerik still had Silverlight products.
Yeah, we do. We do.
I mean, it's been a while since I need to look at the Telerik products again. It's been a while since I looked at them.
It's hard, this business of trying to make developers successful. You always have to have your feet on two sides of the river. You have to be bleeding edge to move the things forward. We work very, very closely with Microsoft, with Google, and all of our other partners to make tools that are for the next generation, future facing. But at the same time, we can't drop support for the things we already have had for years. So you're always in this mixed mode of trying to innovate and push things forward while keeping support for all of your legacy systems. So we have evolved a lot as the web has evolved, and I like telling the story. The classic way for me has been a UI framework that's called Kenda UI. It's very popular for HTML5 JavaScript developers. And when I started 6-7 years back, it used to be simply based on jQuery. It was just a library on top of jQuery. And people were happy. It worked. Everything just worked. Except 7-8 years down the line, now jQuery gets a bad rap for what it is. And we have had to rediscover the same UI library 4 times over. We make UI components now for Angular, React, and Vue. And all of this takes a lot of engineering. So it's hard, but it's a fun business to be in.
Well, cool. So then your other talk you're going to be doing is so what's new in Xamarin.Forms?
Yeah.
So real quick, I mean, I think everyone probably knows what Xamarin is by this point. But so what is Xamarin.Forms? Because obviously it is a little bit different.
And this one, actually, I do feel fairly passionate about. So this has been probably 6 years in the making now. So a small company. So when .NET first came out big time, and it became .NET framework, and it grew over from .NET 2.0 all the way over to 4. Whatever now, there has always been a desire to take .NET outside of Windows. Right, so that's where we see the Mono framework, and the guys who wrote Mono for the first time outside of Windows was for Linux, and it made its way into other things like Mac OS. And it's always been something that grew almost similar to what .NET did, and .NET was not open source. They had to actually re-engineer and reverse engineer things, and since .NET Core has been out, and much of the .NET framework is also out in the open, they have collaborated, and they have worked to make sure the thing that takes .NET outside is just as strong as the .NET for Windows itself. And .NET Core was a reinvention. It was lean, modular, cross-platform. So things have really stabilized.
We'll see what's going on here. Sam, if you can hear me, your video is freezing up in the moment. Oh, there you go. You froze for about 20 seconds.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I think you froze as well. So maybe it was my computer, my network. So, okay, but you're back. So Xamarin, like I was saying, it's about 5 years old now, and the desire was always to take .NET and make cross-platform apps for other mobile platforms. And we started off doing things like Xamarin iOS or Xamarin Android, which is we wrote all of the shareable code in C#, which was a good first step, and then we wrote the platform heads separately. So that was good, but we still didn't want to learn iOS and Android too much as .NET developers. So that's when Xamarin.Forms came along, probably 4.5 years back now. And it was an abstraction that lets you write a cross-platform UI stack which is incredibly difficult to do because like iOS, Android, and Windows are very different platforms, but you got an abstraction that will carry you 90% of the way out there to write a cross-platform UI layer, and then it's C# under the covers, and it's mono under the covers. So that's Xamarin.Forms, that's where it began, and things have evolved very, very quickly to be a very mature framework right now. I mean, there are people who complain about things. The tooling can always be better. The dev loop can always be tighter. But I think Xamarin.Forms has really shown a lot of maturity in the last few years to provide the right tools. So .NET developers can write C# and XAML and yet be able to reach not just iOS and Android. It's Tizen for your refrigerators and your Gear watches. You can also write Xamarin.Forms for the web. We talked about Silverlight for WPF, GTK Linux. So the number of platforms we can support really has opened up quite a bit. And so it's an exciting time. So Xamarin.Forms has evolved, but going into this year and next year, it'll actually be very interesting. And I am going to talk about some of this stuff. So .NET 5 hits production quality at the end of this year, which is I think November.
Yeah, November.
So that'll be interesting because it is a unifying effort. Because right now .NET can be looked at as a little bit of a fragmented system because we have framework, which is not going away. We have core, and we have mono, and we have BCLs for Unity and other things. So they're trying to combine the best parts of everything into .NET 5. But that's still not going to bring in the next evolution of Xamarin.Forms. That's going to come in 2021 because, again, with the pandemic, even Microsoft pushed back a little bit on the timeline. So we are looking at something called MAUI, which is multi-platform app UI. And it's a, I wouldn't say it's a rebrand, it's an evolution of Xamarin.Forms that still caters to iOS and Android, but brings in Windows and official support for Mac and a few other platforms. So all of that goodness stays with you, all of your expertise carries over. What is interesting though is, again, we talked about like walled gardens. We have sometimes gotten a little complacent as to how we build Xamarin.Forms applications. It is purely for .NET and XAML developers. Now, underlying it is very good.
Oh, it's freezing up again.
We are kind of getting a reboot of .NET. We are getting .NET 5 in November of this year, and that's a unification of different types of base class libraries that make up .NET today, like for Framework, for .NET Core, for Mono, and Unity. They're combining all of the best. And then next year, we're going to see Xamarin.Forms kind of evolve into a new thing called multi-platform app UI. And it is going to be the same kind of code base and UI stack that we are used to today, but there is a desire to open up the funnel because right now, if you want to write Xamarin.Forms, wait a second, are you frozen or am I? Or no, we're both good.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah,
it's probably me just not moving around.
Yeah, you're very still when you listen. That's good. I'm kind of like, so Ed is our good friend, and there's a saying that the way you make an Italian stop talking is by tying up their hands. So I think Ed and me are both the same way. We really are very animated when we speak. With MAUI, the goal is to open up the funnel a little bit more because we have kind of gotten ourselves a little siloed in the way developers can write cross-platform code on .NET. Xamarin kind of requires you to write XAML and C#, which may not be everybody's cup of tea. So there are a few other patterns that are coming in.
Oh, now he's freezing up again.
Okay. All right. So we are seeing things that are very similar to like React Native or Flutter being brought over and like web technologies that you are essentially going to be able to use to make Xamarin.Forms applications. So the same underlying framework under the covers, but the way your UI stack is written up can really be different. So again, this just opens up more things. We talked about Blazor, and that's another thing people are looking into. Could you use like Blazor-like syntax to write Xamarin.Forms applications? So exciting times coming up.
Oh yeah, sure enough, I mean, I become more and more of an API developer. I mean, and I always tell people, you don't want me running your front ends because I'm horrible at it. But sitting at the MVP summit, I think the most exciting news I heard was about MAUI. Of course, that was when it was all classified and MVPs only type information. But when I heard Scott Hunter talk about that, I just got so excited And like I say, I don't do front ends, right? But just to hear that we already knew that there, because they talked about that with .NET 5, when they announced it at Build the year before, the unification. But what they were going to do with MAUI was just amazing. And I wasn't surprised that it got extended to .NET 6 because I thought it was pretty aggressive timelines. But that was really exciting to hear that. And again, we're losing Sam again.
So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, this is very exciting, and I think part of it also is the confidence factor. Like Xamarin was an acquisition that Microsoft made back in 2016, and it's always been on the side a little bit. But I think the tooling and everything is matured enough, and they're bringing it into the .NET fold. So I think it should give developers more confidence using Xamarin technologies that it's just part of .NET now.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So no, like I said, I knew you would be excited about it. I mean, again, because I've known you, for years I've heard you talk about Xamarin, so I knew you would be excited with MAUI. Because, and for those who don't know, I mean, Xamarin is basically going to be folded into the system namespace. It's no longer be a separate namespace, and
yes.
Which I think that's a wonderful thing. Right? I've heard some people complain about that, but I think that's the right path. And I think we're all going to benefit out of that. And it is. I mean, it's almost now becoming cliche to say that it's not the old Microsoft, right? It's
no.
Because Microsoft has changed so much since it was the old Microsoft. Although it's still, I still laugh at people when they talk about open source development. Like, oh yeah, I do open source development. I'm like, no, you do Microsoft development. Yeah, it's all open source. They're like, and Sam's gonna freeze up again.
So yeah, to your point, it is a very different Microsoft. Everything is open source,
Mm-hmm.
and the tools are as accessible as one can be. So hopefully we are reaching a broader and broader audience to bring them into the .NET stack and the tools that we have used forever.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm just going to go back to you though. So actually, you and I share some very common interests. But I mean, I love it on your profile. You're talking about you enjoy travel, fast cars, cricket, and then culinary adventures.
Yeah.
So several of those. Not the cricket, because I don't think I've ever watched cricket.
It is it's catching up stateside. I mean, US actually has a decent cricket team now. There are like local things that are catching up, but it's still a long ways to go. But almost every other continent except for Antarctica plays cricket, and I kind of grew up with cricket. I'm born and brought up in India, and I've spent probably 20 plus years, but I still have not lost my touch with cricket. I still watch and follow everything that goes on. Have
you started to teach your kid cricket, or that's still a little bit too young, maybe?
Yes, and we talk about this, and it's a weird struggle. So on one side, like if he, and I mean I have coached before, I can teach him. If he's like half good, he actually has a decent chance of moving forward in a career in an international team here. But he's going to be so lonely, like in school, nobody's going to know what he is. But
well, you never know. I mean, think about lacrosse 20 years ago, right? Yeah. No one knew what lacrosse is, and now it's one of the bigger sports, right? Yeah. Who knows? In 20 years from now,
yeah,
or not 20 years, but 10 years from now, right. Maybe cricket will have picked up more steam.
Yeah. I have never actually gotten into baseball that big because it's just like too similar to cricket. Like American football is just like so different from everything else I have ever seen. So I was immediately drawn to it, but baseball is just like too close.
Yeah. Now there's no question. American football is American, right? I mean, it's who else would think of a sport where it's literally go bash each other up, over and over and over, right? I mean, at least boxing, there's a rhythm to it. The football is just, and I love football. I mean, I'm not, this isn't me, harping on football. I love watching football.
And that's the thing. That's probably the trickiest thing because I mean, a lot of us, we just follow football and we love it. But when it comes to getting our kids into football, we are just like a little hesitant because of the injuries, because of the risks. So yeah, maybe the sport gets a little safer over time.
Yeah, and it's no longer my daughter's boyfriend, but I mean, for the longest time, my daughter's boyfriend was playing for U of L. Well, he's actually graduated now, but they've broken up. But I got to learn a lot, following him along for 4 years, and watching what the teams have done to improve the safety for the kids.
Right.
Of course, there's a lot more. It was collegiate, a big time program, or a decent sized program, right? I mean, but still, to your point, I mean, I do wonder about the future of football, just because it has become such a problem, and there's only so much you can do, right? Which is why sports like soccer, or everywhere else what is called football, and lacrosse has picked up a lot. I mean, sure enough, like I say, I really don't know anything about cricket. I mean, how much different is cricket from baseball? I mean, I know it's got the bat, and all the bats are different shape and everything, but I mean,
it's surprisingly similar. The field is differently shaped. It's just an oval or a round sometimes, and instead of just like 3 bases, you just have 2. And you have the pitcher that comes in from one side, and then you take turns to make sure you're using both sides of the base. And then you have a batsman who's essentially the hitter. And the big difference is you can actually bounce the ball. So the pitch on which you're bouncing the ball has a play. So everything just has more of a play in how the ball behaves. It swings in air just like baseball does, but it does more things off the ground since you're able to bounce it. And then the batter just essentially has to hit it. And if you get to cross the rope, which is kind of like a free hit, unless you do that, you just run between the bases to collect your points or runs. So it's similar in some ways, just the structure of it is a little different.
Sure.
And yeah.
Sure. Well, now the funny thing, I mean, talking about cricket and talking about Code PaLOUsa, right? So we've always used CPL in the last few digits of the year. Well, the funny thing about CPL is that it's also the hashtag for the Caribbean Players League.
Yes.
So every year during Code PaLOUsa, there's a mix of cricket and Code PaLOUsa at the same time on Twitter.
And it's about the same time, yeah.
Yes. Well, it seems like Caribbeans are always. I mean, even like last year, we were still having conflicts between the two. We moved all the way to the fall, but late summer. So I mean, there is actually a tie between Code PaLOUsa and cricket.
I've forgotten that, but yes, I've seen those tweets. Yeah.
Well, as someone who's been following Code PaLOUsa for 10 years, I mean, I know well about. Because it makes it hard to manage social media when you have all the other stuff coming in.
Right.
So, but so how do you talking about pastimes and things we like to do? I mean, how do you manage that with work life, right? I mean, obviously, especially when you're traveling, right? Because I mean, obviously, when you're traveling, there's a lot of work to be done. And obviously, I mean, speaking, there's a lot to be done with that. I mean, how do you manage that with also managing a good, personal life?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge at times, to be honest. I have realized that almost a big percentage of the friends I have are actually friends in the tech industry, which is why I'm missing everybody. These are friends that I hang out with. So when we are on the road, yes, like speaking takes a lot out of you. You're prepping. You're trying to. Whenever somebody gives you an hour of their time to sit in your talk, that's an hour of precious time, and you have to entertain. You have to give them value for their time. So you never ever want to take a speaking opportunity lightly. You always want to present the best of yourself that you can. So that takes a lot out of you. So before and after that's done, there are opportunities to kind of hang out with similar-minded folks, and that's relaxation for you. But then also like you have to juggle your family time, and like for me and my wife, whenever like she's out of town, I'm holding down the fort at home, and vice versa. So it's difficult, but I like to travel. I love to travel with the family, and we love to eat out and enjoy whatever time we have together.
Oh, awesome. So, to ask a question you usually ask on your interview. So what is your favorite food to eat?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I am a foodie, as you can tell. I come from an Indian background, so I like my spices, not like in-your-face type heat, but I like my spices, and I actually like uh, putting an Indian spin on a lot of the things that we normally make. I love making like good curries, but again, like I love making Italian. I love making Moroccan stuff or Caribbean stuff, always with like a little bit of a hint of Indian spices. Yeah, I like just about any type of poultry. Love a good steak, and I love vegetarian as well when I make it. So yeah, it's hard to say, but I mean, favorite cuisine probably is still Indian.
Awesome. So you have a dish that you recommend, an Indian dish that you would recommend to folks?
There's a lot.
And that's probably pretty hard because
Yeah.
Indian dishes get hot very, very quickly.
Yeah, based on the heat scale, they can get hot. But a lot of it is like the heat that kind of hits you in the back of your palate. It's not like
Yes.
very hot like a California or like a Reaper pepper that's just in your face. This is kind of deep heat, but yes, it can get hot. And it's funny, like just like Chinese or any other food, things have evolved on a global scale. Some of the dishes that are actually most popular were not even invented in India, like butter chicken or things we normally get at Indian restaurants. Those are actually things that. So UK is a hotspot for Indian food. You'd actually find best Indian food in UK compared to even India. Some of the Michelin star restaurants are in London, so they have contributed to a lot of like bringing Indian cuisine to the world scale. A lot of chicken dishes, lots of curries, lots of lentils, lots of vegetables. So yeah, it's hard to pick. I love it all.
I gotta admit, it's I mean, obviously Indian is something I don't eat very often anyways, but I obviously have not had it for a while. Although I think that's actually, India might have been one of the last places I ate before the pandemic. Because I remember we did a team lunch at one of the local Indian restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's a little tricky sometimes with the quality of food we are getting. Indian food it's hard to elevate because everything looks like barf on a plate, because it's all curries. But like when you go to the really, really good chefs who have elevated that food and know how to present it right, that's when you see the polish. That's when you see the spices really shine through.
Oh, awesome. Well, let's start wrapping up. Luckily, since we reconnected, the internet's been holding up for us, but
Yeah.
you know, we don't need a chance to too much. But any parting thoughts that you have?
You know, I think none of us saw how this year was going to shape up when we started, right? So it's been hard. I mean, it's honestly, it's hard in terms of people in a variety of industries. I think we are blessed to be able to do our jobs. We have all had to innovate and pivot, but we are still blessed to be able to do what we are doing. Other industries are not as fortunate. So it's hard. It's hard. I think we just all need to have empathy. We need to have kindness for the things that everybody has been dealing with. But again, like they say, like this too shall pass. So anything that we can do to stay productive and not get bogged down by everything else around you, whatever brings you joy, be it family, be it a certain thing that you are passionate in, go on, keep on doing that. And just keep moving the needle forward. We will see better days, better year, hopefully next year.
Awesome. That was a really good closing thought. I really appreciate that. Well, I really appreciate that you joined me for the past hour, and even more that you'll be with us in August for Code PaLOusa.
Looking forward.
Wish you could be here, right? I mean, it's I love having, you know, I mean, part of the idea of Code PaLOusa is to show off my town. We're gonna try to do that virtually. but it's not the same thing, right? You won't be able to go to the bourbon bars and partake. I mean, sure enough, downtown Louisville's got a really good food scene, and you'll won't be able to partake in that. But again, thank you so much to everyone on Twitch. Thank you for joining us. Tomorrow at 11:30, I'll be interviewing Dave Madley, who is a local developer here in Louisville. He's a funny guy, right? So that should be a really fun interview tomorrow. And with that, I wish everyone to do. Thanks, everybody.
Oh, thank you.